This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. Our missing co-host Adam Marr is out training as a potential alternate for the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. He's never even boxed before, so please keep him in your thoughts and prayers.
I don't think he's walking.
I don't think he is. He may not even walk in. I don't even know if he's ready to train. I did run into him though at it's the first time I didn't get to see him at the American Legion, and I did run into him at MCon. He's a lot bigger than I expected him to be.
I know.
I always thought that I could take him in a fight, but now it seems like a lot of work.
He's head and shoulders taller than me. If you guys are listening, imagine that.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Well, we have got a fantastic show for you today. We're bringing in we're also going to bring it to you a few days early. Our guest, Anil Nathan, is a first-generation American and second-generation veteran. He's a co-founder and co-chairman of the board at Vote, a national campaign to recruit veterans and military family members to become poll workers, not to be confused with poll workers.
Oh my gosh, you're too much. But speaking of poll workers, and not those poll workers, but the kind that are coming up very, very soon, the voting type of poll workers. Did you know that it takes about 1 million people to act as poll workers during the election cycle? That's pretty crazy, right?
I didn't know that. That's a lot.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of folks. But there's a national shortage, and I guess it's due to like inadequate pay, poll worker harassment, and partisan balance requirements, amongst other reasons, apparently. So, have you ever volunteered as a poll worker before, Joe? Before we get too deep?
No, actually, I have been called for jury duty before. And my wife loves jury duty. She's like she gets into it. She's like exactly the kind of person you want on jury duty, but I've never done poll work. Is she
a true crime podcast listener?
I don't think she was. I think it sort of turned into that. She's really into the whole mechanics of the entire process, from arrest all the way to conviction. And she's so smart when she gets her head locked in on something. I just wish I could get her to not train herself to kill me and get rid of my body without getting caught.
It's funny you mentioned that because the other day my husband just casually mentioned, he's like, I really wish you would lay off the true crime podcasts because I feel like you're training to murder me in my sleep. But okay, so fun fact, this year Bet the Vote has recruited more than 135,000 election poll workers from veterans and military family community. I guess we're just like civic minded. But that exceeded their goal of 100,000 volunteers. So it's pretty extraordinary. Yeah, I know. And it seems just right because again, we all volunteered to serve our country. So that makes sense that we would go ahead and serve in this capacity too. So pretty cool.
Nice. Well, stick around, Alphas. We'll be right back with Anil Nathan to learn more about Vet the Vote right after the break.
Are you a retired uniformed service member or the family of active duty military? Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Vision is honored to provide you and your family with quality vision coverage. Count on a network with eye care providers in all 50 states and enjoy a frame allowance, covered lens treatments, and more. Now that open season for enrollment is here, take a moment to see what the benefit of blue can do for you. Learn more at bcbsfepvision.com.
Veterans, this Veterans Day, we honor your service and sacrifice, and we're here to support you in more ways than one. Did you know that hearing loss and tinnitus are two of the top service-connected disabilities? Many veterans face these challenges every day, but you shouldn't face them alone. That's why the Heroes with Hearing Loss program, provided by Hamilton Captel, is here for you. This Veterans Day, we're proud to offer solutions like Caption Telephone, which allows you to listen and read everything said during a phone call, making it easier than ever to stay connected with with the people who matter most. Best of all, caption telephones are available at no cost for veterans with hearing loss. This Veterans Day, take a step towards stronger connections and better health. For more information, including eligibility requirements, visit heroeswithhearingloss.org. Stay connected, stay healthy, and thank you for your service.
All right, Alphas, today we are joined by We the Veterans and Vet the Vote co-founder and chairman of the board, Anil Nathan. Welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
You shouldn't be.
Oh, he most definitely should be, considering that he is an Air Force veteran. And of course, because of that, it just shows that he's a very, very smart man. Welcome.
Oh, nice.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Likewise.
I hear that you're legacy military. Is that right?
I am. Yeah. One of my favorite ways to introduce myself is to say that I am a first-generation American, but a second-generation Air Force veteran.
I like it.
My father. This can be a longer story we can deep dive into if it's
no. I'm all about the long. Let's go the long road. Let's
yeah. So my dad was born in India. And in 1968, he was 20 years old and was coming over to the US to do his master's in biochemistry. And about, I think, 9 months into his kind of being in Buffalo, New York, by the way. So going from India to Buffalo, New York, he got a draft letter because back then, a lot of people don't know, but when the draft was in place, you didn't have to be a citizen to be drafted. And he had the option to defer for academic reasons, as we know many kind of politicians and famous people have done previously. But he made the decision to say, look, I'm planning to spend the rest of my life in this country. I'm planning to start my family here. And I'm willing to serve, and so he decided to go in or accept the draft notice. He got to choose his branch because of kind of his academic. He had already had his bachelor's degree, and so he chose to go into the Air Force. Went in, enlisted, ended up going to OTS, and then going to pilot training. Flew the RF-4, kind of at the tail end of the Vietnam War. I am 99% convinced. I don't have like pure data on this, but very, very confident he is the first pilot of Indian descent in the United States Air Force.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
What do we got to do to lock that down historically?
I know.
I don't know. We need a plaque.
Who's out there like nerding it out? We've got.
Yeah, I need challenge your large listenership.
Alphas out there. Put your nose to the grind. We got to figure this out. What's your dad's name?
Oh man, that's a whole other story. So full name, we might need to extend the podcast for me to even say his full name. So his full name is Vishnampet Sivaramakrishnan Jayanthinathan. Another kind of funny story about his service. Back then, the systems that tracked names for people who were in the military were not long enough to handle his entire last name, Jayanthinathan. And so he was actually asked to legally change his name to fit within the constraints of the military systems at the time. He said no.
Oh, good.
But,
good.
which I don't. Yeah. What came after that is a part of the story I don't know. But he ended up going by Jay Nathan as kind of like short. So that's kind of what he is known by. And he was, in his time in the military, he was kind of Colonel Nathan. But
he might be the only person in the military to ever be out of regs by wearing their own name tag.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You can't invent a more interesting way to.
You can't go over the buttons in the center. It's not supposed to do that.
Just being.
I was kind of envisioning a double row name tape.
That's smarter. Yeah.
Row.
That'd be a good one.
I was with the Marines too long to think outside the box. So, because it has to be.
That's why we're Air Force, and you're who you are.
I would like to argue with you, but I can't.
You can't.
But yeah, he ended up spending, I think, 24 years on active duty.
Nice.
He retired in the early 90s, and spent the last eight or so years of his career at the Pentagon, and so, which was kind of the time when I was alive, or I was born in 85, and so didn't really have like a military brat experience. We weren't moving around. So grew up in Maryland, but yeah, that it always had this kind of effect. And I still distinctly remember going to the Pentagon for his retirement ceremony and kind of the feeling of being in that building surrounded by all these other obviously senior people in uniform, all you know, kind of folks that he worked with. And that just kind of, I think, set something in me, which stuck around as I was considering what I wanted to do with my life and the concept of service. So,
and then you chose the Air Force path, and because he was a pilot, is that why you chose aviation as well, or?
So I chose the Air Force. It was almost, actually, it wasn't even really a choice. It was just like default. When I made the decision that I wanted to try out, you know, kind of the military and try out ROTC when I was going to college. It honestly, it wasn't even like, oh, maybe I'll consider the Navy Army. It was just kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to go into the Air Force. Going the pilot route was very much, you know, well, this seems like the coolest thing that I could do. So let's go try that. But yeah, it was yeah, very much apple not falling too far from the tree.
It's interesting how many people's lives have been completely altered over this sounds cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially pilots. I mean, I think it's the best way I describe, especially because when I talk to people who, you know, have known me post my military career and they find out that I was a pilot in the Air Force, the natural question is, well, did you want to, or do you still fly, or did you want to keep flying after, like, why didn't you go into the airlines or, you know, FedEx or UPS? And the best way I characterize it is it generally feels like there's two types of pilots in the military. There's the people who came out of the womb, essentially, like, you know, they were born to be pilots. And that's like,
they come out and they're just,
they know about the world. Yeah, exactly. Flap your wings. Like that is kind of who they are as a person. And they're the people who are like, this seems like a cool thing to do. And I'm very much in the latter camp. But very, very glad to know that there's a lot of people in Camp 1 who are still kind of serving our country in that capacity.
You're just that cool dude who, like, if the plane is going down, nobody knew you were a pilot in your former life, and they're like, "Is there anybody who has experience in pilot and like in flying?" And you're the guy who stands up for like, "Wait a minute, you flew?" Like,
yeah,
that sort of like big question mark.
That is
nice.
I feel like every pilot's fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
weird,
to be
weird, twisted fantasy, but you know, like to be on the plane when somebody says, "Is somebody here a pilot?"
Yeah, I did that.
What if somebody gets up before you and it just steals your thunder?
It's
like you wanted the dramatic pause.
That's the nightmare. That's the nightmare. Yeah. Or you're walking up the aisle and you trip or something like that.
Oh no!
And then Adam Marr, Apache pilot, stands up before you. He's our co-host.
He's a rotor. That's a completely different. Yeah.
Well, you think he wouldn't stand up anyway? Come on. It's the dream. You don't actually have to do it. Just everyone seeing you in that moment is what you want. Right. You don't actually have to follow through.
I dare you, and this is completely off topic, but I dare you the next time you fly, just whenever they're getting ready they close the doors and they're getting ready to take off, just take the belt off, stand up and be like, "I'm a pilot," and then sit back down. Just make the announcement.
See what happens.
Oh,
yeah, definitely in fun.
So tell me how you transitioned out of the Air Force into what you're doing now. Like, how did you get to where you're at now?
Yeah, so it's been a kind of winding path to where from leaving the military to now. But you know, context of leaving the military, I was, you know, as a pilot, I had a commitment of about 10 years plus. They don't tell you this until you're like signing the papers, but the commitment does not include the time you spend in pilot training. So in total, it's about a 12-year commitment. And so I was planning to be on active duty at a minimum until 2019 because I graduated college in 2007, and that's when I commissioned. But in 2014, the military and I think the Air Force and the Army both ran similar programs that were called voluntary separation, which essentially opens the opportunity for people. I think it was during sequestrations. There was a lot of budget kind of considerations and you know, decisions around where manning needed to go and all that type of stuff. And so they offered the option for people in certain career fields and certain year groups to leave service early. And that was not at all a consideration that I had. It was not something that, you know, in my mind, it was like, I'm in the military. I'm, and I'm committed till 2019 at a minimum, and I was enjoying and definitely getting satisfaction and a lot of the intrinsic enjoyment of wearing a uniform. But as I kind of thought about it in that moment, when the opportunity presented itself, I started to think about what I wanted to do post my military career, and the option to kind of make that jump sooner rather than later was pretty interesting. And so I ended up getting off of active duty, or leaving active duty in 2014, and I think a lot of people who've made the transition from the military into civilian life, the kind of wide world of options, and honestly just not knowing how to navigate it and where to go or what to do and what I want to do when I grow up, right? All those questions can be pretty daunting. And I ended up spending a few months just talking to people, connections from the military who I knew had gotten out, friends from college. I landed in consulting, which is kind of the perfect place when you don't know what you want to do to be, because you end up just doing a bunch of different things.
Telling other people what to do.
Exactly.
I don't know
When
what
you
I'm
don't know
doing.
what to do, tell other people what to do.
Yeah,
That sounds
exactly.
like a good thing. Yeah.
So I spent a few years in consulting, and then had the opportunity to go to Uber for a few years to lead or be the kind of general manager of their aviation business, which was super interesting and fun experience. And then went back to consulting after my team was sold, and then just recently left to start my own company, which has kind of been the dream all along ever since I left the military, or the itch that I needed to scratch, was kind of taking the entrepreneurial road and building something from the ground up. So that's been the kind of path, but it's all along those routes, right? I mean, the decisions have been primarily based on, even leaving the military, it was kind of a gut feeling about, look, this is what I think the right thing to do is and what I want to do in this moment, and what I think is going to be right for me in the long term, or right for me and my family. And that's kind of the path that's taken me to here. And obviously can talk about We the Veterans and and Vet the Vote as well, and how that fits into that entire picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually was going to touch on that. As a co-founder of We the Veterans, what motivated you to be a part of a nonprofit that focuses on civic engagement for veterans and their families? I'd love for you to share a little bit about what your initial vision and goals were when you became involved.
Yeah. So it's a pretty kind of fascinating story in terms of how the organization came together in the first place. But it all kind of started to happen in 2021. And obviously January 6th was a pretty seminal moment in our country's history. But the way that we think about it, and myself and Ellen, who's one of the other co-founders, Ben Kaiser, a few of the other folks who we all kind of got together as veterans and military family members, I think there was a general or a collective sense of wanting, there are a lot of divisions in our country, right? There's a lot of stuff that divides us. A lot of it is, amplified at a surface level versus what actually, there's a lot more that unites us, right? When you actually get below maybe the first 10% of political type things, right? And that there is, as a veteran and military family community, there's this massive untapped resource in this country of patriotism and a sense of commitment to our country, and kind of belief in those things that unite us, because all of us who have served or who have served alongside, as a family member, have made a commitment to protect and support and defend the Constitution, and that is a very strong uniting force. And so for us, it was a bit of, how do we get off of the sidelines in some ways? We were worried we don't have to wear a uniform to be in service, right? We can serve our country, and we can make a big impact, or any impact, without needing to put a uniform back on again. How do we do that? And I think that was the kind of uniting, galvanizing force that brought the group of us together, and obviously what started the foundation of what we built to this day.
So
No,
Yeah,
go
I know.
ahead,
I was
Joe.
going. I was going to say, so like, I think about, so one of the things that I tried to focus on when I first got out of the military is the fact that, and it drove me absolutely crazy to be in the hospital. I was hurt in Fallujah in 2004. I got a nice parking spot out of it though, so it's not all bad. But I I watched them pulling people from the very top brassiest brass to talk about what was happening over there. And it drove me absolutely crazy because you're going to get politicians answering political answers. And if you really want to talk to people who knew what they were doing and what they were talking about from a ground up point of view, which is what I think that the civilian population was looking for, you got to talk to these these E5 E6s and even even some of our lieutenants and stuff like that, these guys that were there on the ground. And getting our veterans involved in the conversation from the ground up was something that I always wanted to do. I was a part of the Vets for Freedom founding, which was, we did media training and stuff to try and get people in front. And I the impact that I think that had was something that I'm still finding out to this day. I'm friends with David Bellavia, Medal of Honor recipient, and I didn't even realize, I got involved because it was something I believed in, but I didn't realize how little involvement veterans have in so many different aspects of how our country runs. And it seems wild that so much of it falls on our shoulders and so little of it relies on our minds. And so I want, I love what you do. And I love that you encourage veterans to become more involved in everything, including the democratic process, particularly as poll workers. So
Right.
what do you see veterans, what role do you see veterans playing in safeguarding our democracy? Because it seems like a weird thing to say, is that as part of safeguarding our democracy because you're being a poll worker, but this is how our country runs. This is vital. How's the response been so far, and what do you think veterans play a role in safeguarding our democracy through doing things like poll working?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think a huge role, right? And part of the grand theory in some ways that that we the veterans as an organization was founded on, and then what Vet the Vote kind of has validated is that when we make the call to action to the veteran and military family community to step up and serve again, they will answer it, right? And it's important for veterans and military family members as a community to be involved in civic engagement and leading from the front, because we are, as a community, number one, we are one of the most trusted groups of people in society, right? It doesn't matter whether you are on the left side or the right side of the political spectrum. Universally, the veteran and military family community is trusted, right? And the military is still one of the most trusted institutions, regardless of your political beliefs. And if you think about in our country, how many things and institutions exist that are not divided on like a 50-50 line, right? There's you can count them on two hands, and that's something that is important for us to lean into when we're talking about our elections, because that is not it's not a left and right issue. That is the foundation of how our self-governance works. And so if we have a trusted community that we can get more deeply involved in those processes in a non-partisan way, right? And purely as in a means to to make, like you said, make elections run, to be poll workers, so on and so forth, then the theory is that, and this has started to be borne out, that if you trust veterans and veterans are working elections, then you by proxy will trust elections more, right? I think that's a core aspect of it. There's also a truth to it, which is, look, as veterans and military family members, right? I think to your point, in a lot of ways, we're looked at as we're put a bit in a position of, people assume that we know all of this stuff, right? Because we served in the military, like we swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution, so we must know the Constitution like inside and out, and all and all these details about how our government works. And I think there's some truth to that, right? But it's not like all of us got a deep civic education crash course when we joined the military. I mean, you kind of cover some of the basics, but what are you saying when you swear that oath? But, there's a lot that veterans and military family members can benefit from just getting more educated and more, more knowledgeable about how all of these processes and how these things work in our government, because we are trusted. If we can then be the kind of, I don't want to say advocates, but the people to basically explain things when there are questions, or to advocate for some of the core, processes and way things run in our country, then we are strong messengers for that, right? And so there's a bunch of good that comes from getting our community more involved in our civic engagement, civic education, and obviously participating in our democratic processes.
Yeah.
I like advocate. I don't think it's a bad word for it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I think, military members, they dedicate themselves to duty, honor, and service.
Yeah.
And when people know that a person's a veteran who dedicated their lives to that, when you're willing to lay your life on the altar of freedom, then you know that inherently is a lot to ask of a person. So I would think safeguarding our civic, safeguarding one's right to vote seems like it would be a no-brainer. How do people know when they're walking into a polling place? How do they know that it's a veteran who's safeguarding their right to vote? Is there a distinction? Are they wearing a shirt? Are they even allowed to wear anything like that that distinguishes them?
If they're Marines, it's usually face tattoos.
Oh yeah, the high and tight,
Yeah,
just a flat top. That's the only
flat
way.
top. Equal globe and anchor on the side of the neck.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Makes sense.
It's
crayons and a
like,
Lunchable. Sorry.
So many of these, like you said, are they allowed to, right, to wear, any form of like a Vet the Vote T-shirt, for example, right? That so much of this is defined at the local level, which is actually in a lot of ways, I mean, one thing that we love to talk about when it comes to the strength of our elections, and even if somebody wanted to commit like widespread fraud in some way, shape, or form, like it is, the way everything is built is so decentralized and so, locally managed, that it's like it's a feature, not a bug, right? I mean, it makes things harder to kind of, it's more cumbersome to kind of process everything and administer, but it's the right thing to do, because it creates all this, very localized aspects. But to your question around identification of, our veterans and military family members, how do you know that they're working at your election site? In some places you can wear a T-shirt. In some cases, or in some places it is, very specific, like you can't advocate or advertise or look like you're representing any specific group or things like that. And so for us, it's obviously a component of, or it's more about making people aware at a national level and at a local level about the concept that there are, as of today, I think we're almost at 164,000 veterans and military family members who have signed up to work the elections this cycle all across the country. From, I think we have coverage over a large majority of zip codes in every state and Commonwealth, Puerto Rico as a territory. Like, I mean, we have veterans and military family members who are working elections all across this country. And while you might not be able to specifically point out when you walk in, sans high and tight haircuts, or maybe even a hat that says Vietnam veteran or Afghanistan veteran, whatever it might be, you should have confidence, and you should know that we are a very, very integral part of how our elections run, all across the country.
Yeah. If there are alphas here who are listening that are on the fence about volunteering to be a poll worker, what does a day look like as a volunteer?
Yeah. Again, something that varies pretty significantly, but I will tell you from my experience working elections here in Westchester County, just outside of New York, and also having seen it at Clark County in Nevada and other kind of places where we've been partnering with local election officials. It generally is a combination of some level of training, before the actual election itself. Though even now, even a week before the elections, some locales will, are accepting volunteers, and even up till, the day before, we'll kind of figure out ways to get people into roles and slots that, that fill major gaps that they have. But there's generally some level of training about, what are the processes, how do you operate the systems, how do you answer questions, those types of things. And then on the day of, it's a pretty full day. I mean, on Tuesday, I will be showing up at my assigned election site at 5 a.m. and I will be there until 9 or 9:30 p.m. So it's a full up day of everything that's needed to get that polling site set up, as well as obviously helping voters actually exercise their right to vote, and then at the end, packing everything up at that polling site, making sure that the information and the data and all the paper ballots, anything that's there, is all handed over to kind of the central location appropriately. But I will say, despite how long of a day it is one of the most rewarding and inspiring experiences that you can possibly have. And I say that, as somebody who has worn a uniform and, and seen and observed a lot of very inspiring and motivating things, the feeling of being a part of the democratic process in a way that is, obviously I think all of us probably take some pride in and have a sense of satisfaction of showing up at your polling location, filling out the ballot and sticking in the machine and knowing that I made my voice heard. But the feeling of being on the other side and actually helping people exercise their right to vote, and knowing that if I wasn't there, that this entire process would be a little bit harder, right? It would be a little bit less efficient. It would be a little bit slower. That plus just a deeper knowledge and appreciation for how rigorous and how structured and how patriotic all of the other people who are working the elections, or the election officials, like the people who do this full time, are to kind of make these things run. I mean, it is in a lot of ways the best of our country, right? I mean, it is so much of what our country stands for, and until you kind of put yourself into that situation, it's hard to really appreciate it. But I will say that it has completely changed the way I think about elections, not because I had skepticism before, but because I just have this like much deeper sense of appreciation for everything that goes into making our democracy run.
I mean, I think also we have an emotional investment and in many cases, physical and time investment into making sure that the thing that we have given so much for is done right in the end. When it comes down to it, these elections, whether you agree or disagree, is part of that freedom process. It's like, I know a lot of guys, they were over there in 04, and regardless of what the Dixie Chicks said, they were still listening to the music because, that's part of freedom. These people that want to desecrate our flag and things like that, like, in a weird sort of way, wow, what a country. Find another country where you can do something like that. And if somebody was going to, like, of course I wouldn't like it. I'm not one of those veterans who would run up and hit somebody for doing it, but I also wouldn't let someone else do that. I would talk to them about it if possible. And I say all that to sort of circle back around to the fact that if anybody is going to have an investment in making sure that this stuff is done right, and also have the guts to acknowledge when it isn't done right, it's going to be veterans.
And I will say, I mean, obviously we've talked to and engaged with a lot of people, both in the veteran and military family community and outside of it, about poll working and trying to inspire people to sign up and volunteer to be a part of it. And in some ways, the best conversations that I have had are with people who do have some level of skepticism, or kind of have a question about, hey, I heard this story about X, Y, and Z happening in this county, and it seems fishy, or something shady happened. And my like advice to them is, if you have questions, then you should go be a part of it, right? Like, if the best way for you to, number one, ensure that elections are running smoothly is to not be on the sidelines. It's to go volunteer and be a part of it. And number one, I think, like, you will obviously feel a level of satisfaction of knowing that you did your part to make sure that elections are free and fair. But number two, I guarantee you that you will step away from that process feeling a much, much, much higher degree of confidence in the way that our elections are run, and that there isn't, yes, nothing is ever perfect, right? There is never any way that, especially at the scale of what we do as a country, every 2 or 4 years, can happen without any semblance of things not happening the way they're supposed to. But by and large, our elections are amazing processes to run, and truly are free and fair. And so get involved, right? Like that's the call to action. And regardless of whatever questions you have, like the best answer is to get involved, because you will kind of get a deeper understanding and deeper knowledge versus just reading about it from whatever sources you're getting it from.
So to sort of follow up on that point, you're not only policy director and professor and pilot and all these amazing but you're somebody with a deep understanding of impact evaluation. And so I obviously, when you get involved with something like this, you're thinking long term. Mm-hmm. So what are you seeing as a long-term impact on veterans getting involved in every aspect of the democratic process? And I know the answer to some people might seem, pretty obvious. Well, yeah, they're already invested. It's just a continuation of serving as blah, blah, blah. But I know you, just in the conversation we've had so far, I know there's a plan. I know that there's something there that you're working to reinforce. Can you touch upon that?
Yeah, but well, I wouldn't necessarily call it a plan, but I would call it a belief, right? Yeah. Which is that our mission as We the Veterans, and Vet the Vote is a campaign and an initiative under that is We the Veterans is kind of spearheading and created the coalition around. But our mission as We the Veterans is to strengthen our country, right? I mean, that is first and foremost, and to empower the veteran and military family community to do that, right? And we believe very strongly in this, almost a flywheel effect in some ways of veterans and military family members getting more engaged, they themselves, by being engaged, gaining more trust in the system and in the overall kind of everything that we are about, and also more invested, to your point, right? Like when you are involved, you are more invested, and that feeding on itself, right? The more trust and investment you have, the more you're going to want to get engaged, and the more your other veterans and military family members are going to see you, and then they themselves are going to want to get engaged. And then broader American citizens, because we are a trusted, we are a trusted group within our country, they see us and they have more trust and they want to get engaged, right? And it's this kind of flywheel effect of engagement and trust that then, as a whole, kind of spins off this like a strength, right, that feeds into our country, and again focuses on the things that unite us, not divide us. And so the way we think about Vet the Vote is a starting point for that, right? I mean, serving in elections, serving as poll workers is obviously a very important duty, and something that is a very critical role that needs to be filled when we have elections, right? But there is a lot of time and a lot of space and a lot of civic things and need for engagement that happens in between those election cycles. And so how do we continue to, now that we have this base of 164,000 people, how do we continue to create opportunities and advertise and connect them with local governments, community organizations, other, all these other entities, to have basically the matchmaking of veterans and military family members who are patriotic citizens, who are excited about serving again, connecting them to opportunities to serve, and that just being this really, really powerful mechanism for strengthening our country as a whole.
That's awesome. So we're going to have your social media channels all linked in the show notes, but where can alphas, if they're interested in signing up, where can they, do you have a website? Where do they go? How do they do it? What's the process?
We do have a website. It is vetthe.vote. So it's VETTHE.VOTE. And that website there's 3 things you can do on that website. Number 1 is register to vote if you have not already registered. Check your registration if you want to just confirm, which is, trust but verify, right? And then number 3 is sign up to be a poll worker. And all of those things, is basically us connecting you to your local election district or state, kind of Secretary of State's office, whatever it might be, to basically direct you to the right place to do those things. But that we have all the resources available as a starting point there to do that.
I would also encourage people to read the entire website. I didn't, and I've been working at the Funny Bunny on weekends for the past 2 weeks. It's the wrong type of poll work, and I would like to apologize. Read the entire website. It gives a little more information. Don't get stuck like I did.
We were out in, so we have one of our members of our coalition, the Vet Vote Coalition, is the National Football League. And the NFL has been an incredible partner.
Oh, cool.
From the very beginning, right? From our first campaign in 2022. And so we have done a lot of events and activations with local teams. We've also participated in the Super Bowl. The past 2 Super Bowls, we've participated on Radio Row, kind of doing interviews, events, and things like that. But anyway, when the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas, last year, or I guess earlier this year, and it feels like forever ago. The concept of, or the confusion around poll working became an even bigger.
The lines were blurred.
How in Vegas that could be a bit of a sliding scale.
Put the free back in Fremont
Nice.
Street.
All right, I see what you did there. That was good.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man. Well, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you.
You stole my thank you. I was going to thank him.
Well, you know what, Joe?
I'm going to thank him. I mean, you
Take it
can't
away.
even stop me. You can't even stop me. And no, thank you so much. My thank you is way better than hers. And I just wanted to clarify that I've been waiting for this. I wanted to thank you, and she tried to steal my thunder. She tried to be the pilot that stood up first. I'm not going to let it happen. I'm not going to let it happen.
I tripped on the way out. And he was like,
I tripped her.
I
am also a pilot.
Tripped, yeah. It was thank you to both of you, and this is fantastic. I mean, I really appreciate obviously what the American Legion does in terms of promoting civic engagement and all the youth programs, especially. I mean, it's so important that we continue to instill, and I think everybody would agree, regardless again of political spectrum, that we need to do more as a country to educate every generation on the foundations of what our country stands for and what it's all about. And so I'm very thankful for what the American Legion does there. And obviously to you all with this podcast, I mean, highlighting some really incredible veterans and folks out there doing great work. So appreciate you having us on.
Outstanding.
Hey, Neil, thank you so much.
I thank him. Stop thanking him. It's me. I'm the thinker now.
Hey, Anil, as we are wrapping up, I just wanted to give you my best C-17 bitch and Betty voice. Are you ready?
Oh, yes.
Low altitude. Pull up.
Pull up. Yeah.
Go.
That's a good one.
You guys are joking outside of my realm of understanding here. That was out of my wheelhouse.
That's a triggering
Pull
sound.
up.
Yeah.
Pull
exactly.
up. I'm like,
is it microaggression right now? Is she attacking you?
Well, if you hear that in the jet, then you're in a bad situation. So I just automatically got to move the throttles up.
All right, Alphas. Thanks so much. Please stick around for some scuttlebutt after the break.
As a veteran, you've done more than your fair share of providing support. Now it's our turn. Introducing the WellCare and the American Legion Partnership and the WellCare Medicare Advantage plans that give you more support, more access, and more benefits in addition to your VA benefits. Visit wellcareforveterans.com today or call 844-917-1165. Ohana Health Plan, a plan offered by WellCare Health Insurance of Arizona, Inc. New Mexico Dual Eligible Special Needs Plan, DSNP members. As a WellCare by Allwell DSNP member, you have coverage from both Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid services are funded in part by the state of New Mexico. New Mexico Medicaid benefits may be limited to payment of Medicare premiums for some members.
Okay, Alphas, we hope you had a fantastic break. Now it's time for some scuttle booty. Have I said that recently? I love scuttle booty.
Every time you get that scuttle booty on your mind, my friend.
I got booty on the mind. I can't help it.
Yeah, it's all that pole working.
Oh, gosh.
So Marine Corps vet alleges she was booted from the Delta flight last week after wearing a shirt calling for an end to veteran suicide, according to multimedia reports. Catherine Banks told NBC Bay Area that the incident occurred Wednesday as she wore a shirt that read, quote, "Do not give in to the war within, end veteran suicide," end quote. This seems like a pretty nice thing to do, to wear a shirt to end veteran suicide. So it seems like a no-brainer. Why the hell would she get kicked off a flight? Delta calling you out, boys and gals over at Delta Airlines. Banks told NBC that she was attempting to fly out from San Francisco on an international flight. Quote, "A male flight attendant was saying, 'Ma'am, ma'am,' end quote. I looked around like, who was he talking to? And it was me. He said, 'You need to get off the plane.' And I was like, what did I do?" Banks said, according to NBC, Banks could not be reached for comment, but NBC reported that she learned why she was booted from the plane while on the jet bridge by the flight attendant. He said that the shirt you're wearing is threatening. I said, "Are you kidding me? I'm a Marine vet. I'm going to see my Marine sister. I've been in the Marine Corps for 22 years and worked for the Air Force for 15. I'm going to visit her." He said, "I don't care about your service. I don't care about her service. The only way you're going to get back on the plane is if you take that off right now." I'm sorry. Excuse me. She's wearing a shirt to end veteran suicide and he's complaining about it. And then he's like saying, "I don't care about your service." This is the most deplorable thing I've heard in a while. Banks told NBC that Delta eventually let her get back on the flight, but that he had to sit in the back and missed the connection because of the delay. Delta said in a statement to the Marine Corps Times on Monday that the matter had been resolved. Well, that doesn't feel like a good resolution, in my opinion. We appreciate Banks's patience as we continue to work to understand what occurred during the event, Delta said. Most importantly, we are thankful for her service to our country. Well, this feels like lip surface, Delta, kind of a knee-jerk reaction.
Words are super easy to say. I would like to apologize for anything bad anyone's ever done. Can we move on now about all the bad things that's ever happened? Because I feel like I just covered that.
I will say this though. I've always known that Delta really supports their veterans, and I've done things with Delta Airlines, and they have a veteran program. So I know at the heart of their corporation, they do care about veterans. And I do wonder if this particular flight attendant has a grudge and they were just taking it out. And we all know that there are isolated incidents where this happens and that one bad apple can really ruin the bunch. So I hope that this is that case. And I'm really sad that it was taken out on a veteran who was obviously doing something for the greater good. The airline's website states that the flight crews may remove passengers when their codes of conduct, attire, hygiene, and odor creates an unreasonable risk of offense and annoyance to other passengers. I cannot see that this is one of those instances, though. So I
have seen some things in the airport that people have gotten on planes, and that right there, I've seen like straight up curse words like "F and do it," like it's like crazy, and people just get on and off the plane. The problem that I have with this is twofold. One, the absolute chat GPT of that apology. There's just no thought behind it. There's no specifics. And the second thing behind that really frustrates me is that regardless of whether this is one bad apple, it takes steps and other individuals to pull someone off a plane. One person who works for the airline doesn't just get to dictate that someone gets on and off a plane without someone else getting involved that should have said at this point, "Hey, what's up with your reading comprehension? Because this is obviously in no threatening manner. Like this is not something that is threatening."
I had an incident recently with American Airlines. So we're calling out all airlines here, I guess. And Charlie, my service dog, is with me all the time. And he's my hearing mobility and service support dog. But he also, does things for PTSD. And everyone's flights were delayed. it was a mess. But as I was trying to board the flight, the guy who was working the gate was a complete and utter asshole and was berating me in front of everyone and dressing me down because he had nowhere else to place his aggression and anger, and I was an easy target. And
a worker?
Yeah, one of the workers.
Ooh.
And I was just in no place. I was already like having a panic attack of my own. I was not in a great place, and Charlie was trying to support me. Thankfully, other people on the flight saw what was happening and stepped in. And I typically don't like being coddled, or I don't like people fighting my fights, but it was nice to have people kind of step in and offer that barrier. It makes me wonder, did people do that on this flight, seeing what was happening? Because I think if there's anything that is wonderful about this country is knowing that if a veteran is obviously standing up for what is right, other people will stand up and defend what is right as well. So, and you're right, Joe. I think this was a lip service response. There could have been a more meaningful response in saying, there's a Be the One campaign from American Legion. Delta could have said, be the one to stand up to end veteran suicide, and you can go and take the training and do what is right. So anyway,
I also want to add that I think the best way Delta can handle this is to own up to it directly, obviously. And then I also want to say, to just sort of reinforce, I flew back from Vegas, and my flight was supposed to leave, I believe at roughly noon, and we didn't fly out until after 8. Delta was incredible to us. They really were good there. So I want to put on the other side of things. Also, alternatively, because it ended up being a delayed flight instead of a cancellation, most of the same people had sat on the plane together for 2 hours. We were joking around and goofing around. The vibe was good. And then as we got off, everyone's kind of hanging out and eating and using our meal vouchers they gave us. And then when we got back on the plane, that experience was the most heartwarming, because everyone had been hanging out together for the last 8 hours or longer. And people were like, you can sit. I mean, just people were just letting anybody do whatever they wanted. It was just so like warming and welcoming. And I was like, why did it take so much for us to get to a point where we were treating each other with this much love? Because it felt great, and everyone was laughing and having fun. And the workers were obviously in an awful situation, having to rebook, half of the people that were on the plane. And it was just, Delta did handle that well on my end. So, again, it could just be a bad apple.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, everyone knew the situation was uncontrollable. It was an act of God. Yeah. Everyone was in the same boat. We were all stepping back and saying, listen, we're all stressed out. We're just going to take a deep breath and deal with it. And it was just one person who didn't know how to manage their stress. And, I called the disability line and I talked to them. Good. And I said, hey, listen, this was the situation and it is what it is. But I think this is an opportunity for us to have a training opportunity to say, hey, this could have been done better. It could have been done differently. And maybe if this occurs again, here's an opportunity to approach it differently.
Alternatively, we can forget this ever happened and you can send me a $500 Visa gift card.
They were like, here's some miles. And I'm like, listen, I don't want your miles. I just want assurances that no other person with a disability has to go through that.
Because we're pretty tough. Like, we can handle stuff, but even as tough as we are, when you're tired, when your spirit is tired, when you're not doing well, we're not always on top of our game. Like you said, you were not having a great moment in that time.
Yeah.
It makes it worse. So,
but I think, our super producer, Holly, did point out that this particular situation that this veteran faced on this Delta Air flight was that it speaks volumes to the stigma when talking about mental health and suicide. And it does. I think we are still in this weird position where talking about suicide in public is it's strange and awkward for people. But I think the more we can talk openly about it and honestly about it, the more we can embrace and move past it and talk thoughtfully and more heartfelt about it. And so let's do that. Let's be the one to make change.
Absolutely. We'll have the links for that in our show notes. I also wanted to bring up something. The American Legion is making a debut on a streaming service this month with a November 8 release of Office Joe. Now, it's not about me. I wasn't even asked. I wasn't talked to about this. I feel like I should have been involved, but that's okay. New comedy series features an all-star cast of military-affiliated entertainers and entrepreneurs. I can say it, but I can't spell it. I can barely say it. Including writer and director, Army veteran, and Legion member Nick Palmasiano. Office Joe explores the challenges veterans face during the transition from the military to the civilian world, which is something we bring up on the podcast a lot. And while the laughs are many, there is a serious undertone as Joe transforms from G.I. Joe to Office Joe, which leads him on a path to find the new tribe, the new tribe and purpose he needs to be successful and happy. So it's produced by former Air Force pilot. These Air Forcers, man, they're everywhere. Kevin Alexander Hurd. The series follows the journey of Joe Hauser, who leaves the infantry and drives across the country to start his dream job, become a graphic designer. Both Palmasiano, if I'm saying that wrong, dude, call me. It's just let me know, and then I'll tell you I should have had your part. And Hurd are members of the American Legion Post 6 in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They've assembled a who's who of famous veterans to lead the ensemble cast, including UFC fighter and television star Tim Kennedy, Jared Taylor.
I think that's Kennedy.
I'm so Kennedy right now. Jared Taylor, another Air Forcer. Is that the correct terminology? A forcer, Air Forcer?
I think it's Air Farce.
And co-founder of Black Rifle Coffee. I won't say nothing bad about that. I flipping love. You guys want to sponsor somebody? I'll do a bodybuilding show just for you guys. I'll get back in shape. Put me in, coach. Austin Von Letkeman, aka Mandatory Fun Day on Instagram. Okay, that guy. I know him. Former American Legion Tango Alpha Lima podcast co-host Ashley Gutermuth.
I know her.
Gutermuth. An award-winning stand-up comedian and Air Force spouse. Mayans MC car Vincent Rocco Vargas, who I follow on Instagram. That guy's a rock star. An Army veteran, actor and writer Jack Mandeville, a Marine veteran. So old Palmy points out that the I'm not going to try his last name anymore. I feel like it just gets worse every time I say it.
And this is why nobody hires him to do a podcast because he just can't read scripts.
Hey, I'm an improv guy, okay? Palmasiano points out that the Office Joe underscores the American Legion's primary mission, Be the One, which aims to reduce the number of veterans and service members who die by suicide by promoting awareness of the issue, fostering camaraderie, and empowering everyone to be the one to save the life of a veteran who may be in crisis. In Office Joe, there's a lot that goes wrong, but when Joe's in the Legion or talking to a Legionnaire, the advice is always sound and the place is always safe. Palmakabanu said. Everything else may be going south, but the Legion is always the life preserver. We are showing the idea that be the one without overtly, saying it. But make no mistake, our message is that the Legion is there for you. The series will be available on Amazon, Apple TV, and Googly Play.
I think that's cool. Amazonian.
I do love a nice Amazonian.
Apple
It's a fruit company.
I think everywhere you can watch streaming is where it's going to be. So
that's right.
That's it.
And we'll also have the links for that in the show notes because our super producer, Holly, is incredible. And that's what she does. She has never made a mistake.
That's right. Here we go. He's not Captain James T. Kirk of the USS Enterprise, but General Chance Saltzman, the most senior military officer leading the U.S. Space Force, has been compared to him before. We're not here to defend against aliens. We're not here to do interplanetary explorations. We have NASA to do that, he said in an October interview. But Saltzman does have something in common with Star Trek's William Shatner, who portrayed Kirk. Both have strong Kentucky connections. Saltzman was born in Owensboro and grew up in Bowling Green, where he graduated high school in 1987. He then attended Boston University and launched a 28-year career in the Air Force before transitioning to the Space Force in 2020 and taking its top job in 2022. And in October, Saltzman, a 4-star general and chief of space operations for the Space Force, was inducted into the Kentucky Aviation Hall of Fame in Lexington. General Saltzman was also a featured speaker during the American Legion National Convention in New Orleans, where he joined Medal of Honor recipient Michael Fitzmaurice to bestow the 2023 American Legion Spirit of Service Awards. Hey, why aren't you a Spirit of Service Awards winner, Joe?
I don't know. It's possibly due to my illiteracy.
Oh, that might do it. We'll have a link to the video of General Saltzman's address in our show notes, but alphas, this is exciting. General Saltzman will be a guest on our upcoming episode of our podcast. I'm really looking forward to this because I have so many questions about the Space Force. It came into fruition after I left the military, of course, but I do wonder, as a photographer, had I hung around, would I have been a Space Force photographer? Big question. Something that we could go down the Reddit rabbit hole on, perhaps.
Would you go to space?
I probably would have if given the opportunity.
Yeah,
Let's
I would have.
dive into that on Reddit. Would you have joined the Space Force? We want to hear from you. Join us on Reddit. Go to r/Tango Alpha Lima. You can also email us your questions at tangoalphalima@legion.org.
We'll have the links for all this stuff in our show notes because, again, our borderline perfect super producer, Holly, will do that. And all the links will work and nothing will be wrong. And you're going to be super inspired by all this.
I think that's quasi good producing.
Is it Holly or Holy?
Holy. Holy Holly.
All right. So, Alphas, thank you so much for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail, not mills, not people.
Send us meals.
Send us meals. I'm so hungry.
Meals on wheels.
And guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next week, unless I close my eyes the whole time.
We need to peel Adam off the floor after his boxing excursion. See y'all soon.